Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our first Omtrips podcast. We're so excited to have Simon here. So Simon Borg-Olivier, he's my yoga teacher, I guess, from quite a while ago. 10 years ago, I attended his first Goa teacher training retreat, and that was like probably one of the most amazing trips I'd ever done in my life. So I'm really, really appreciative of that. And maybe that in a way led me to doing Omtrips, because I've realized how a lot of people can really benefit from these amazing trips, to wherever they want to go. So who else to invite than Simon for my first podcast guest ever? Thanks, Simon, for joining us today. Really happy to have you here.
It is such a pleasure to be here with you, Karen, and I so enjoyed our trip to India 10 years ago now, you're saying it is. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was so long ago. That's amazing. It was such fun.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I would just love to, I guess, dig a bit deeper and learn more, like, just in terms of travel. Like, you've really traveled the world. I mean, even this year, I followed your tour. You've been to so many countries, like Berlin, London, Sweden, Mallorca, and then you're off to like Slovenia and China, Philippines, Bangkok, Sri Lanka. Um, and I don't know, even I think you've added more places to your list when I looked at your feed
I was
recently.
studying the other day as well. It's actually too much traveling. I actually don't like the traveling part. I love meeting the wonderful people around the world, and that's the best bit. But the actual getting on planes and things. I think I was on planes or on at the airport or going back and forth to the airport for 30 days last year, and I've got the same this year. So that's the only unpleasant part of it. But the actual meeting people and being with people around the world in beautiful places is really fun.
Yeah, great. I actually want to ask you at some point, like, how you actually stay healthy through all the traveling. Like, that would be such a huge like impact, I guess, just to your body to and have to stay healthy to teach or retreat, which would take so much energy, I bet.
It does. The couple of secrets I could share with you just as a very quick answer is that I minimize the amount I eat as much as possible. And what I eat is predominantly fruit, salad, and vegetables. I usually only have one big meal a day. And I've, for 40 years, been vegan, excluded cooked oils and processed foods. And also, I have a practice which is much less like a workout and much more like a work in, which actually gathers energy and rejuvenates me rather than wearing me out. It's a physiologically balanced and mentally balanced practice, which also nurtures my muscles and joints, everything else like that. So I've been really fortunate to have great teachers, and I've put this information to use to try and help me live in a way where I can do the outrageous things that I do around the world. And the other thing I do also, which is important, is I I teach in a way where a significant portion of my teaching is visually instructed. So I'm actually demonstrating and doing what I want the students to do with me. It's not exactly the same as my own practice, but it's a lot more rejuvenating than the mode many teachers adopt, which is just to walk around the room and talk and adjust, which actually gets very, very draining. So I'll do that for a while, but then for at least a period each day, I actually do some practice. And if I'm not teaching, I also do my own practice. It makes a big difference for rejuvenation. Practice what you preach.
Yeah. Now your teaching has been really easy to follow. Like, I actually haven't attended that many yoga studios because it just didn't, drive me there. But with your teaching, like, it's really stuck, and it's just, yeah, I guess the kookaburras in the background. But yeah, it's led me on quite a journey, like on more of a self journey to kind of like discover, more of how I want to practice myself as well, which is really good because I'm busy mom with two kids. Like, I can barely make it out of the house sometimes, so it's been really beneficial to have this like sequence down in my mind that I can practice regularly. So yeah, it's been really amazing.
Yeah, well, you're a good yogi and you're a good mum, I can tell.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess earlier this week I read about your friend passing, and it just led me to think like, oh, you've really done so much. Like, probably when you first started yoga was like traveling to actually go learn, but now you're actually traveling to go teach. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about your journey, through, I guess, all the over the years of travel for yoga.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to learn the beginning of breath control from my father when I was 6 years old, and I learned a lot from him as a free diver. It taught me the essence of yogic breathing, which is to breathe less. And the longer you can not breathe for, the better you do, especially if you're traveling underwater. And then at the same time, I was taught yoga kriyas by a wonderful man called Basil Brown when I was just 8 years old. And the kriyas control your internal organs, which is something I continue to practice till the present day. And that they were very important mainstays. I learnt that in South Africa as I was coming on a boat emigrating from Europe to Australia when I was 8 years old. And then about 17 years old, I was fortunate enough to meet a Tibetan Lama in Australia who, gave me the inspiration and the understanding of the philosophy of yoga that actually led me to begin doing yoga classes. And then after a few years of embarking on first Japanese yoga, then more Indian yoga, my teacher sent me to study with BKS Iyengar in Pune in India. And so that was the first of 27 trips to India. And the first 10 or so were always to study. I also, met Pattabhi Jois in India, and I also studied with Desikachar, meaning I was working with the main students of the great Krishnamacharya. And it was wonderful to work with them in person, before they all passed. But, I also traveled to China, and I've had some really amazing teachers from China. And so that traveling to learn was very big. It was actually very expensive. I think people don't realize that nowadays people complain about spending money for a teacher training course and they're just doing 1 month. But when I started learning, no one was qualified in a month. You had to spend 10 years learning at least before you were considered a beginner teacher. And I probably spent many hundreds of thousands of dollars traveling and paying for courses and learning and also dedicating time where I wasn't working to earn money, but rather, learning. And I think that's a bit misplaced in the modern world today, where you can buy a yoga course online for $150 and get a certification, or attend somewhere for 1 month and get a certification. I don't believe anyone can be certified to do something as complex in yoga in just a month. Obviously, you learn something, but I think the world of modern yoga lost its path a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, I mean, I'm still a bit conflicted right now myself of like, just, I don't know, like, there's so many people teaching online now, but like, how do you compare that with like, in-person learning and teaching? It's just, I mean, I don't know how I can compare, but I mean, obviously the world is online now, so I suppose yoga has to evolve in a way. But I suppose the way around it is to actually go on these retreats or in-person trainings to really, get that experience, live in person.
It definitely helps. It definitely helps. It's really a wonderful thing. If someone can come train in person, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And actually, I'm interested in learning about, like, I guess just traveling in India back then. Like, I mean, it must be so different from now. Like, what was that like?
When I first got to India, there was still no television sets, very easily accessible. I was there at the end of 1985, and I remember a couple of years into my travels there, like more like around 88, maybe beginning of 1990, there was one situation where I was traveling in Pune, where BKS Iyengar was teaching, and I was late for a class because there was a massive traffic jam. And the traffic jam eventually, when I eventually took an hour to come to the place where the main problem was hundreds of people around a shop front window which had a television set in it. And everyone was mesmerized to the television set. And on the television set was Australia playing India in the cricket.
Oh my God.
And in those days, there was just so little interaction with the West. The Indian population was just so pure and really living a traditional life. Whereas now, 40 years later, it's a very different place, and India is just as westernized as most of the West in many regards, especially in the big cities. And the young people's bodies also reflect that. Because when I first came to India, if you were a traditional Indian bodied person, you would, squat to go to the toilet, you would sit cross-legged for every meal, you would mainly walk, carry things on your head, making these people very easily able to do yoga postures. But that is not happening in the case anymore now. Now, many Indian bodied people live the modern lifestyle of sitting in some sort of seat for 5 to 15 hours a day, and they've got all the problems of the Western bodies now. It's a very different place physically, physiologically, and mentally. Everyone in India now has an iPhone, for example. There was one time where you'd meet a beggar who had nothing, but I was approached by a beggar not so long ago who was, scratching at the car I was in and asking me for money. And then I almost said something, but it was interrupted by her telephone ringing. And excuse me, I'm trying to beg for money. I can't talk to you right now. It was quite different, quite funny. It's a new world in India. It's not the same as it used to be, but it was very, very different when I first started traveling. Also when I started traveling, if I was thinking I better contact my mum, because as parents, we both know how important it is for your children to keep in touch. But it was like every few weeks, I would make a 2-hour trek to go to the one telephone in the area that I was in to try and contact my mother. It was very difficult to actually connect with people overseas. And a connection via mail usually meant that you're writing something and then 6 weeks later you get a response back because it takes 3 weeks to write the letter, to send it over and to get a message back. Very different world in those days.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose now, like, how do you think, I guess, in or how is yoga, I guess, regarded in India? Are there more people practicing? Because I feel like when I was there, it wasn't like for traditional or just the local Indians. They're not that into yoga. Like, how is it now?
It was very interesting because in the beginning, you're right, there was not much interest in yoga because it was a traditional thing. The real yoga, actually, in India, even to this day, happens in the culture, in the way people are with each other, in the way people live as families and treat each other in terms of the ethics, the philosophy of being. And that's still there to a certain extent. But now I'm finding that because of the loss of the natural traditional lifestyle, I'm actually getting a lot of Indian students, people who realize that yoga has something to offer physically, physiologically, and not just mentally and philosophically. And they're actually approaching me as someone who's, trained from some great masters in India. So in the last training I had in India, I had 5 Indian students. I had a couple of doctors, one who was a very, very knowledgeable uh, Indian anesthetologist. And it was just really humbling, actually, to see how much they paid attention to me and showed me respect. I was very touched. But I had to always, and I'll always come back to saying that if I'm helping you in any way, it's because India helped me so much. I got so much from the great teachers I learned from in India, but also the cultural heritage. Just living with a family in India for a while, you learn so much about yoga.
Yeah, yeah, it's just interesting how yoga, I guess it's kind of gone to the West and then now it's coming back to the East again. And although it's been modernized and now, I don't know, maybe it's going in a circle. Like, for example, even in China, like I noticed, I was in China recently. There are like all these modern yoga studios everywhere. It's like it's really popular in China now. And with China, I just feel like now I'm actually really interested in learning Tai Chi. I've learned yoga. Now I want to go back and learn Tai Chi. Like, how do you find actually teaching yoga in China? You've been to China to teach. How was that?
It was amazing. I'm actually going back again in a couple of months, and I'm already dreading the idea of getting the visa for it. But apart from getting the visa, it's an amazing place to be. I was really touched and moved by the beautiful students I have there and their wonderful respect and interest in modern yoga and also what I was teaching as well. But I think I was lucky in some ways because I have had great Chinese teachers as well. So I could speak to them in some way about how their traditional movement system relates to the Indian yoga system. And that helped a little bit as well. And I could, talk from a perspective which was a little bit different to what much modern yoga is. The way I see most modern yoga is it's often become too physical and just gives short-term benefits and strength and flexibility by often overstretching, overtensing, often over-breathing and just creating stress inside your body. What I think of as real yoga is something which is much more with the combined simultaneous benefits of exercise and rejuvenating sleep at the same time. And that's a lot harder to do. Most people stress out in exercise, then follow it by relaxation. I think you should be doing things which look stressful but actually feel relaxing. And that was a concept which was very new to the Chinese students that I had, that you can actually practice in a way which is really rejuvenating and gentle, but also giving strength, flexibility, and fitness at the same time. But
Yeah,
they're very
and
open.
yeah, and it's really interesting that you've had, quite a few Chinese teachers, because I'm Chinese myself, and I guess just growing up, all my I don't know, grandparents, parents, they're really into qigong and tai chi, and they believe in all that. So it's interesting to see kind of the fusion or the integration, or just knowing that at one point in time back, I don't know, however many years ago, it was kind of probably all one thing, and it just like branched out.
Yes, every day I find a deeper understanding of how yoga and qigong are essentially the same thing. It's just the interpretation we got in the West of yoga and qigong was a little bit mistaken. When I say qigong, I'm including all the movement systems of China, and when I say yoga, I'll include all the movement systems of India as well, because really we're talking about a philosophy. But what we see, I think, in the modern world of yoga in the West is they talked about prana and prana being a type of energy, and they often killed the prana by overstretching, overtensing, and over breathing in a way which mimicked postures which were very suitable for the Indian people, but not suitable for Western modern bodies. So they got limited benefits in strength and flexibility, but they missed the essence of prana. And along with that, then they lost a bit of the philosophy behind the suitable practice they should have been doing. And then in China, with the principles of qigong, they talk about qi, and qi is also the same energy, I presume, as prana is. But often the way it was presented in the West was this very soft, gentle form, which many people adopted, but a lot of young people went, no, it's too soft, it's too boring, it's too slow. But many people, especially older people, took it on board and they went, yes, this is perfect for me. But the essence of how to work correctly with it was often kept secret by the Chinese masters, who would often wear these beautiful silk shirts and talk about controlling movement from their dantian or their core, but their core was covered up often by a silk shirt. So you never really knew what they were doing underneath that silk shirt. So many of the practitioners in the modern world of Qigong often are doing nice, relaxing movement, which is better than no movement at all, but they're missing the point of where it comes from and the depth of the secrets that are part of it, which essentially I see as being the same as the secrets of Indian yoga. I mean, we only have one human form in the world. People may get a bit niggly about someone from China looking a bit different from someone from India, but essentially there's only one human species, and what works best for one species, one human, should work for all humans, really. So I believe the great masters all over the world probably eventually came to the same realizations and truths about the body. So at its core, essentially, Chinese movement systems like Qigong and Indian movement systems, including yoga, they're essentially the same thing. And I see this ongoing every day, the relationships between the two. So I feel like I'm teaching the same thing, neither at the same time, because I'm not born in India or China, but I'm just doing my best to offer something which will help people on physical,
Yeah.
physiological, mental levels.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I was just wondering, like, has your, I guess, yoga evolved? Like, does it evolve constantly? Like, how does it flow? From, I guess even 10 years ago to now, or and into the future, like, does it keep evolving?
For me, my yoga is evolving on a daily basis. You know,
Okay.
every day I learn something else, and every class I teach or every course I teach, I learn from the people in my classes. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't really know anything, and there's no hard and fast rules, and that everything is right at the right time, and everything can be wrong at the wrong time as well, or the right time. And so I'm definitely evolving my practice to the point that some people who come to my classes now, having been with me for 10 or 20 years earlier, they go, your yoga's completely changed. And I go, no, it hasn't changed. I've just understood it more. And so now I'm presenting it in a way where the results I'm looking for are more in tune with what yoga was meant to be in the first place. So that's my personal evolution. But I think that real yoga is always going to be the same thing. It's
Yeah.
modern yoga is real yoga, I think.
And I guess, how do you see it evolving to the future? I mean, you're not teaching in a studio anymore. You teach more at like just trainings or online. Like, how do you see your teaching evolving?
I think that within 10 years, most people in the world of movement and exercise, yoga, qigong, will all be teaching a lot more like what I'm teaching now. I mean, I'm not the innovator of what I teach. I've had many, many great teachers, but because I've been doing this for so long, often what I teach becomes popular. Like, the most popular types of yoga in the world today, which are this vinyasa flow type of thing, are what Bianca Matchless, my business partner from Yoga Synergy, and I developed and taught very, very prolifically in the 1990s. So that most popular type of yoga today, essentially, we were already teaching 30 years ago. So if I thought that was still the best, I'd be teaching that. But I think what I'm teaching now has much better long-term results. And I think gradually it will filter down to everyone, and people will all over the world will eventually start to incorporate an understanding which has some sort of fusion between what modern people think of as qigong and what modern people think of as modern yoga, what modern people think of as exercise, what modern people think of as meditation. It's got to have all those benefits, because you've got to teach in a way which is going to achieve health, happiness, and longevity. Really, that's what people want. And it's not enough just to attend to muscles and bones, muscles and joints, which is what most people's focus is. You have to look towards people's ongoing physiological health, including the health of your circulation, your nervous system, your immune system, digestive system, reproductive system. Unless these organ systems are all functioning optimally, there's no point having strong and healthy muscles if you never heal, your cells don't reproduce, if you have no energy and your nervous system is fried. Even then, your mind is also a mess in those situations. So, what I've been trying to incorporate into my teaching and my practice is something which engages not just the physical, but also the physiological or energetic aspects of the body and internal health, as well as the mental aspects of the body. And I think that gradually more people will come to realize this is important. And part of this is also seen in the fact that many older people have stopped doing modern yoga. I mean, most modern yoga is taught now to people in their 20s and 30s, because once people start getting to their late 30s and 40s, they realize they just can't do it anymore. It's not sustainable to doing these intense stretching exercises, contorting your body into postures. And if you force it, as many people have done, you end up with multiple joint replacements, after the age of 50 years old. That's what I saw many of my friends have happened to themselves. People who I worked with in the 1970s and 80s, many of them are either incapacitated, dead, or sick, or they've certainly often, mostly, stopped practicing the yoga they used to practice, and either gave up entirely or are adopting a much more gentle practice, which is more sustainable. And I think that in the world of modern yoga soon, in the next, might take 20 years, more of the world will realize that's the way that really is necessary for health, happiness, and longevity.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. As I'm getting, older, I'm realizing all that as well. Um,
You look young, but you're not as young as you used to be. Neither am
well,
I.
I was a late adopter of yoga. I just thought it was too boring, actually, until my 30s. I only got into yoga in my 30s, and in my 20s, I was doing other things like snowboarding and capoeira, like much more interesting things. But then I
Yeah,
realized, yeah, when I hit 30, I was like, oh, I don't think I can do all those things that much
yeah.
anymore. I need to do something more gentle.
It's a
And
funny thing too, 'cause you have to engage people's mind in a practice. And I'm constantly faced with dealing with people's bodies, but recognizing there's a physical aspect, which is their muscles and joints, a physiological aspect, which is their energy systems and their internal organs, and this mental aspect. So if the practice is not engaging, especially to a young person, they're just not going to do it. So I'm constantly giving my students, when they're in a group situation, the possibility of, are you going to do this approach or this approach or this approach? But this giving people choice is difficult because people can't really choose what's best for them. And, in the last training I did in Spain, I had some wonderful people. One was slightly older than me, and one was only 20 years old. And they need a very different approach to the practice. So, really, I think yoga was once taught traditionally to one on one. But in the modern world of yoga, where finances play a role, unless you're independently wealthy, you mostly have to teach groups. And really, in a group, you've got the problem that everyone needs a different approach. And otherwise, as you suggested, if someone is 20, they're probably going to be really bored if you make it too slow. But if you make it too fast and someone's 40, it's going to get injured. They're going to get injured. So it's really hard to give that flexibility to people without them either getting confused or not making the right choices.
yeah. Another thing is like with, I guess, yoga, you're trying to work towards that sitting meditation, and you sit, it's quite rigid, and I find that's becoming harder as well. And I kind of prefer that flowing movement where it's more like Tai Chi, where you're just meditating wherever you go. And that's kind of like my preference now. I was wondering, like with you, do you like, how long do you do sitting meditation for? How long do you do the, like, what's kind of your balance for yourself?
Well, see, I look for achieving the meditative state throughout the entire practice. And what I'll say to people is the meditative state can be done in any static or dynamic activity, provided you're getting things like the ability to be sustainable. So you can do it for a long time. It has to be engaging mentally, at least. So it's exciting, but not so exciting, it becomes stressful, calming, but not so calming, it becomes boring. It has to be sustainable, engaging, calming physiologically, um, effortless in how you do it, so there's no sense of stress while doing it, but also invigorating. It must move blood. Karen, I think this is so important that many people doing what they think is meditation are often sitting in a cold, uncomfortable position, and they're just getting cold and bored. They might be concentrating a little bit, which is an aspect of the meditative state, but unless they're in a very comfortable, sustainable position where they're actually moving blood, it's not meditation. It's just sitting in a cold room, getting cold and bored, often seeing someone cover themselves with blankets because it's winter. And when I first saw a meditative person, it was my Tibetan Lama sitting naked in the snow, and I'm going, okay, he's relaxed, but he's also moving blood. And I think that's too difficult for modern people to do, but you can get that meditative state a lot more achievably, as you said, in something which is dynamic activity, a moving activity. And it's okay to sit still or sit in a stationary posture, could be a yoga posture, or it could be just sitting on a chair or the floor. But for most people who spend in the modern world between 5 to 15 hours a day sitting in chairs already, I don't think it really helps people. I think you're better off keeping the static movement, the static postures, especially sitting on a chair, to maybe 1/10 of your practice time. And the other 9/10 of the time, it's better to do movement. And as a physiotherapist, one of my favorite axioms which physiotherapists use is uh, exercise is optional. but movement is essential. So if you can make meditative, gentle movements, you get so many benefits physically, physiologically, and mentally. And you can enter that meditative state, which is actually akin to the zone or flow state of the elite athlete, but without needing to be an elite athlete. All you've got to do is just move a little bit in a way where you're feeling a bit warm, but not feeling stressed. And for an elite athlete, they could run very fast and not feel stressed. They can talk normally. And that's what they encourage people to do who are Olympic runners. An Olympic runner, if they want to get to the next Olympics, is told for if you're running for 100 minutes, the best results will come to get you to the next Olympics if when you're running for 100 minutes, for at least 90 minutes, you must be able to talk normally. But only for 10 minutes would you work hard enough that you can't talk. And I think this is something which we should adopt much more in our yoga practice and generally in our exercise practice. And that 90 minutes, the elite athletes will call themselves being in the zone or the flow state. But for them, because they're fit, they might be running much faster than we could run, even if we're sprinting. But for them, it's okay. So we have to all find a way of moving for if useless for us, but nevertheless gives benefits. It might not look anywhere like the elite athletes' practice, but for us, it must satisfy the requirements of being in the zone. And I think this is really important to incorporate into your yoga. And then you can get the meditative state. While you're moving, when you're stationary, maybe sitting on the floor, but also when you're stationary in each pose as well. Because really, when you think about it, it's not that you're stationary in a seated meditative position, because your blood is still moving. You've got to keep the blood moving. Once the blood stops, you die. So no meditative posture is in fact stationary. There's always something moving unless you die.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess, I mean, we're all trying to, I guess a lot of our goals, we're trying to just get to that flow state, that meditative state. So, I mean, I guess it's just up to you to choose how you get there and how you evolve over time to get there.
Yes.
It's just your choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, you as the teacher, you can only guide them to a certain level of, you know,
Yeah.
how they achieve that.
I give them 3 steps. But the first step is make that your aim. And I call the meditative state a place where meditation in the modern world, if you ask what the word meditation is in Sanskrit, the only translation you can really give is not dhyana or dharana or samadhi. The word is yoga. Yoga and meditation are meant to be synonymous words. But in the modern world of yoga, if you look on Instagram, someone calls it yoga if they're in the splits or balancing on one hand. Someone calls it meditation if you're sitting in a boring position being still. But really, they're the same thing. So I teach my students to treat them as the same thing. And I go, what does yoga mean? It means the same as meditation, but yoga we know means connection. And how do you best connect with someone else? Well, you share your good energy and your loving information. If you want to connect with a person you invite for dinner, you make them dinner, you say nice things to them, and you offer them good things. But if you don't want to connect with a person, you invite them over, you shout at them, and you steal from them. That would be a really good way of not making a friend. So I think if we're going to connect with ourselves, we have to also share good energy and loving information inside ourselves. And the way you do that physiologically, the good energy inside your body is healthy blood flow without the heart racing. And the loving information is inside your body, that dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system. So I'll say, make your aim in your practice to move good energy and loving information inside your body. And to do that by getting enhanced blood flow while being relaxed, while working with a pain free, functional body, because once pain starts, you're not going to be in parasympathetic nervous system dominance. You won't feel relaxed. So once you've got that idea as the aim of the practice, then second thing is stop doing things that prevent that from happening. So what prevents that from happening is doing practices where you overstretch, overtense, overbreathe, overthink, and in your life you overeat. So I say, okay, stop blocking good energy and loving information inside your body by doing what you're doing, but doing it in a way where you can tense less, stretch less, breathe less, think less, and eventually you eat less as well. And then on top of that, then the third thing is, can you encourage the movement of good energy and loving information inside your body? And how do we do that? Well, the number one thing is each movement should be beginning with your own muscles, not using external forces like one limb pulling another, like momentum or with gravity. Many people fall into poses, collapse into poses, and that often means then that you're putting your body into positions which the body can't really do or didn't really want to do by itself. Like, for example, someone sticking their leg behind the head or putting their legs in a lotus. In India, a flexible bodied person will sit with their palms together and lift one leg behind their head, or be in a headstand and just fold their legs into lotus. But if you have to take your leg and pull it behind your head or into a lotus, that's not the legs wanting to do that. That's the will of your hands and your head forcing your limbs into a place they don't want to go, which is an invitation for injury and also does not encourage healthy blood flow. So moving actively is really important in your practice in the beginning. Then the second thing is moving from your core, not locking your core as many people do, but connecting with your gut brain. The gut brain is that, plexus or network of nerves between the navel and the pubic bone inside, which is your action brain, the intuitive brain. And once you connect your thinking brain in your head with your gut brain at your core and make all breath start from that point, all movement start from that point, then your practice changes in a revolutionary way. And so it's move actively, move from your core. Then the third one is breathe naturally, easiest way of breathing from your core. And then make the movements fluid, graceful, like a dance, not jagged, staccato, which often disrupts energy flow. And so when I apply these three main principles in the teaching of my students, then they get a much better result and it leads them much more to the meditative state, which can be achieved either in any static or any dynamic activity. And then they're a lot happier as well afterwards.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that insight. There are, I guess, quite a few ways to get there, and you just don't want to force yourself.
No.
And I guess there's another, I guess, dimension I want to touch on is, what about like supplements that you can take to help you achieve that state, like plant medicine? Like, what are your thoughts regarding that? How as how it should go hand in hand with yoga or not? What are your thoughts?
When you say plant medicine, are you talking about psychedelic things like ayahuasca,
Yeah,
DMT, or are you
yeah.
talking? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you're not
well,
talking
kind of the
about.
range. So it could range from, yeah, psilocybin to ayahuasca, because those are also kind of retreats that we touch on as well with Omtrips that we offer. So yeah, I'd love to hear, what you think about that.
Okay, no, I'm totally into it. I've experimented with different psychedelic drugs going back to the 1970s, and I think they've played an important part in my life. My Tibetan Lama, when he was teaching me when I was 17 years old, said that in Tibet he'd been given various types of psychoactive psychedelic substances, which he said opened doorways in his brain, which allowed him to access parts of his consciousness that were otherwise not available. But once he did that, then the doorways were visible to him and he could access them without the drugs. And this is pretty much the experience that I've had. It changes the way you think. And so, in line with that, is the research that was done in the last 10 years. Over 1,000 people were subjects at Johns Hopkins University in the United States, where they gave people psychedelic substances such as psilocybin, but also pure lysergic acid diethylamide, the LSD. And they had volunteers who were, mentally screened to be safe to do this. And they found that in the 1,000 or so subjects that have gone through so far, almost all of them said that this is something which changed their life for the better. Many of them said they would never do it again because it was very intense, because they gave them quite a high dose. But they said definitely they're glad they did it and it changed their life for the better. And at the same time, they studied these people in a way that they had not been able to study them back in the 1960s when this type of research was allowed, because it was banned for about 30 or 40 years. They managed to do brainwave analyses on these people. And they found, having studied their brains with a electroencephalograph, etc., they they found that the people on psychedelic substances were actually having brainwave patterns that were missing a whole aspect of the brain function. And so a particular part of the brain network switches off. That's called your default network. So when you're on psychedelic substances, the default network switches off, and the default network you could think of as that place that your mind might go to when you're maybe waiting for a bus. And the bus, you don't know if it's coming in 30 seconds or 30 minutes, so you can't really go and do a task because you might miss the bus. So you stand there and your mind just starts to drift off. And as it drifts off, you start thinking about what you were doing yesterday, what you've got to do tomorrow. It's your time traveling center. That switches off. And then also you might start thinking of your relationship with your partner or your children or your boss or your employees. That part switches off, your ego center. So suddenly, on psychedelic substances, what they found in almost all the subjects that they studied with brainwave analyses at the Johns Hopkins University was that people's mind stopped thinking about past and future, stopped thinking about the separation between their consciousness and others, but rather became in a place where they're living in the present moment, completely connected to their activity that they're in at the time. And they said, this is incredible. We've never seen this brainwave pattern in any group before, except for one group. And the one group that they'd seen this state before was in profound and proficient meditators, not the average meditator, the sort of meditator who can, really still their mind for long periods of time, the advanced yogis and monks. And so for me, this is a really important connection. But I think we have to be wary that not everyone is ready for psychedelic substances. You do need to have some sort of mental screening. Things can go wrong. It's all about timing and setting and placement. Because taken the wrong place, taken the wrong dose, it won't be appropriate for some people. But if it's done in the right place, something like plant medicines, mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, these sort of things, and even in the right time and place with the right purity, LSD, they can all be very, very useful for helping people connect with themselves in the same way that yoga is meant to. But I think people could also just do it only once and actually probably achieve enough for a lifetime if they're done in the right place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't actually read about that research, but I guess that gives people more incentive that they really should practice some yoga. Like if they want to optimize, whatever they're planning to take, maybe having some, meditation or yoga experience would really add and enhance, the
They
experience.
work together.
Yeah.
I think they both work together really well. Not for everyone, but I think that it's interesting that the research showed that there's a relationship between the effects of psychedelic substances done in the right time and place, and also what we're looking for as the meditative state in yoga. And of course, the meditative state done properly has so many benefits. There's hundreds of studies telling you about the benefits of meditation. And so, really, it can help so many people to at least see what that could be like with a psychedelic substance, and then maybe start looking for it in their life through correct meditative posture, movement, breathing, and mental control in the form of whatever you want to call it: yoga, qigong, exercise, movement, going for a walk, maybe, walking in a way where they're not so tense, moving their hips a little bit, breathing naturally, not forcing, not over tensing. It can be done in pretty much any activity.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Especially I guess nowadays we're just so busy with everything, but then we're all always like sitting so much, like you want to incorporate as much of this exercise as possible when you can. Even like right now I'm actually standing. I like to stand at the computer so I'm not sitting because my back is just hurting from years of being on the computer. It's terrible.
Me too. I know. Yeah, you try and get off the desk as much as possible. I mean, the only good thing about iPhones is that you can actually walk, and I dictate into my phone to write things as I'm walking if I'm doing emails or something like that. The less we can be on our seats, the better. It's bad enough we have to be in cars and buses and trains, and we have to sit on toilets which are like chairs rather than squatting to go to the toilet mostly, and sitting on other seats to eat and stuff like that. Definitely better to stand as much as you can, move as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, talking about toilets, like China, like they've really modernized. And when I last went
Yes,
back, they're all modern toilets, and I actually prefer the squatters. Anyways, I
yes.
don't want.
Same in India, Karen. Same in India. When I first went there, there were squat toilets everywhere. Now I've hardly saw a squat toilet anywhere.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just my hope is like we are becoming this westernized world, but hopefully we evolve back and go back to traditional ways that are also fused with the modern conveniences, and hoping this all leads to better path for a future. Um,
I'm hoping so too. I think to make this change, it's going to take quite a bit of time, and we have to somehow usurp the mainstream media, which is working alongside with multinational corporations, which are selling us all the things that actually don't help our bodies. So somehow we have to usurp that. At the same time, we have to also work on the children because there's no point getting an adult to say chairs are no good for you, sit on the floor, because they just won't be able to. So one of the first things I teach people when we do seated meditation is I say, look, we're going to do a seated meditative practice. You have to be still for, say, maybe the first time might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I say you must be in a comfortable position, and unless you are used to it, sit on a chair, because if you're not in a comfortable position, you won't get meditation. You'll just be inside going, my knees, my back, my back. So unfortunately, you can't just send people back to the floor unless they're children. So one of the things that I invested in when my children were growing up was I actually elected to send them to either a Montessori school or a Steiner school. And at the time, I know the philosophies are different with both these schools, but both of them did not put children on chairs. And so in the end, I sent them to a Montessori school because that was the closest school. And I was really happy that they did not sit on chairs for the first few years of their life at all until they went to high school. And I think this made a big difference in their bodies. Both of them have got tremendous healthy bodies now. And at those schools, I actually was invited to come and teach yoga at the Montessori school. And I was amazed how disciplined those kids were in terms of their mental body, but also the energy they had physiologically, and also their ability to move freely with a pain free spine, hips, and knees. But because my classes in the Montessori school, this is like 10 years ago, got so popular, the local schools in the area, public schools, started asking me to come and teach there. But what I noticed was that the public schools, children of the same age as my children, were physically totally messed up from just a few years of sitting on
Oh
chairs.
no.
So I would like to see in the future that all children go back to sitting on the floor. I don't know how we're going to make this change. But hopefully, people will realize that it begins at school when people first go to sit at school and start sitting on chairs for 8 hours a day. Let's get rid of that first. Adults is too late for, I think.
Yeah, maybe I should get rid of the couch and the chairs at home
Yeah,
before it's too late.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, amazing. Really, thank you for being on our podcast today. There were lots of interesting things to talk about, and yeah, leads me to want to do some more research and read more about all these things. Yeah, so thanks so much, Simon. And I actually want to announce that we're kicking off another giveaway really soon, like in the next couple of days. We're giving away $2,000 US dollars towards a retreat of your choice, the winner's choice of any retreat that's listed on Omtrips. So this is like a fantastic opportunity. Like if you've always wanted to go on a retreat, like definitely enter in our giveaway. I think this is going to be amazing, and we're actually going to do more of these giveaways. Like our goal is to spend less on advertising and more back on actually the retreats to give back to the travelers and the hosts, so we make good use of our valued things. So yeah, so thanks so much, Simon. Just wanted to announce that, and yeah, feel free to let all your followers know as well, that this is coming up. So
I
yeah,
think
thank
what
you.
you're doing now is amazing. I really appreciate what you're doing with Omtrips. You've been a tremendous help to me, and I really love your work. And I think giving away things like that are really good. I got so much great feedback when we did the giveaway. And yeah, look, thank you so much for your ongoing work with this. It's just a really big service for people like me and anyone who's interested in going on a retreat. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Pleasure to
thanks,
talk to you.
Simon. Yeah, I just want to make retreats as accessible, as possible to everyone. It's not limited to yoga teachers or limited to people that, just want to go on holiday. It's kind of a mix of everything. We want to provide like the most authentic retreats possible, globally around the world to everyone to attend. So that's our goal.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well
Thank
done.
you, Simon. Thank
Mm,
you.
thank you.